Welcome to Cover to Cover Book Meet. I'm your host, Roger Nichols. We have a treat for you today. Our guest is author Scott MacFarlane here with a sequel to his highly rated debut novel, The Bone Shrine. Actually, we interviewed him about 3 years ago and 2 weeks ago with a sequel, and here he is back with a sequel. And we're happy to say the interview has previously had several hundred views. We hope to get twice that for this one because it's so good. Scott's got strong ties to the Mid-Columbia. He served as the founding executive director for Columbia Gorge Discovery Center in the Dalles, Oregon, which opened in 1997. He also is one of the few of the hundreds of authors that I've interviewed who actually has an MFA in writing. That's a Master of Fine Arts, and he is a Master of Fine Arts, as all of our readers know. Since 2005, apparently, he's lived in the Skagit River Valley of Western Washington, and with his wife Brenda, herself an artist, and he's also been a transit driver. Are you still doing that?
I am. I'm
Okay.
looking to retire in about a year, but I've been doing it for about 12 and a half years.
Are you
It's great for, leaving it behind and being able to dedicate writing, unlike working at the Discovery Center project, which was pretty all consuming.
it was. Well, we should tell people that in the Bone Shrine, several mysterious items were cleared up, but not the identity of the killer of Mary Quinn. Still a mystery, and readers will be happy to know, without telling you who, but the answer is solved in the new novel, which is titled Who? And it answers that question. Um, I have got to believe that you have so much fun in writing this because there's lots and lots of Easter eggs, which I'm going to explore a few of. But are you a happy writer?
Yes, I really enjoy it. It's just like of course, it's this book has a drug element to it, but it's like
Mhm.
I Jones when I'm not writing. So
Yeah,
I enjoy writing a lot. It's you know
yeah.
what
It's
I say,
interesting.
calling for.
It is really interesting to see you've changed. I mean, in the first book, you had some different viewpoint characters, but toward the end of Bone Shrine, you brought on Biff McCoy, and she's primarily the vision for whom we see most of the book here. And she has developed into an amazing character. I want to know her.
That's a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was a
Okay.
compliment.
Yeah,
Go
Biff
ahead.
McCoy came. She arrived in the Bone Shrine, the first book, about I'd say a third of the way through, and Joe Gardner is accused of murdering his high school sweetheart, long-term girlfriend, Mary Quinn, when she's found drowned in one of the pothole ponds near Moses Lake. And um, Mary Quinn's best friend was Biff McCoy. And so in the first book, there's quite a tension and rivalry between the boyfriend and the best friend who are always competing for Mary Quinn's attention. But I mentioned in our earlier interview, the real cool thing about having Biff McCoy is she was the confidant of Mary Quinn, who's no longer alive, and she can basically speak for Mary Quinn, which is kind of a cool role to have. Just like Joe Gardner's mom, I had Rochelle Gardner, who
Mhm.
was the fictional head of the Chamber of Commerce in the Dalles, who is obsessed with trying to get her son freed. She became a great way to get out from the jail and be a
Mhm.
amateur sleuth, so to speak. Well, the amateur sleuth this time is Biff McCoy, who's obsessed with finding her best friend's murderer.
And she even gets a job or an internship, I should put it that way, not a job, because she's not getting paid for it, with the sheriff's department. And she is pretty dang good as a detective. I think I'd want her on my side. Um, Boy, so much stuff to talk about here. Let me just mention one of the things is the owl theme that goes through this. The owl theme, Biff feels that owls she sees are inhabited by the spirit of the slain Marion. And near the end, and I'm not giving anything away here, she sees a vision as if through the owl eyes of all the events that took place that led to Mary's death. And it's a symbol of Mary's ghost spirit, which can't rest until her killer is found. That was a really moving scene. How difficult was it to write?
I um I have 3 dream sequences in the second book, and of course, Mary appears to Joe when he's in jail being, accused of murder and this drug deal that went sideways, but, um, I wanted to have 3 scenes so that the reveal of what actually happened that night had some precedence, and I sent you an author proof, and since then, I actually revised it where I wrote it in present tense with much more, tight, sentences,
Mm,
just it's more and it has a decided differentiation from the rest of the tone of the book, which is first
mm.
person through Biff.
Interesting.
And the present tense makes it hotter. It's a sort of, and then of course the declarative sentences when you have high drama work too. So all 3 of those scenes um, lead up to the last one where finally the people see what actually happened on that night through, like as you say, Biff has this dream while she's you know um, injured and in the hospital and whatnot. So
Mm.
I don't want to give away too much, but
It's so easy to do that when you're talking about something as complex as this. But let me throw a few other themes that run through both books. I think one of them is, and I have to say, as a longtime coin collector and numismatist, I'm very happy to see that coins figure into the story, and Krugerrands, no less. I won't say any more about that, but I just want to mention that also. Um, and one of the other things that I enjoy was the fact that there is good cops and bad cops. And we have very clear distinction between, though we don't always know how bad the bad cops are or how good the good cops are.
it's interesting too, and one of the themes that I have running through that is somewhat of a parallel to that is Biff gets in a habit of some pretty big fibs, let's call them. She lies on her own benefit. So I mean, we're in a society now, American culture is needing to reckon with the ends justifying the means. What are we willing to do to get to the end goal we have? Well, in a
Mhm.
minor way, here's Biff, who I want to say the third chapter of the book is really pivotal to shift for the Who sequel, and that's called Requiem for Mary. That's when Biff comes back to the Dalles and meets with Joe, and she had been abducted by one of the local gang leaders in the second chapter, and she does not dare tell her boss or her mother that she'd been abducted because she knows she's going to be pulled off that case. It's much too dangerous for her.
Mhm.
But who does she confide in was Joe, her nemesis, her rival for Mary's
Yeah.
attention. And it's a transformational moment. Here's Joe that was looking at decades of prison, who suddenly they realize that now they're pretty close to best friends. They have their, back and forth
Mhm.
issues, and it's a great way to show her resolve, but what she's willing to do in the name of finding Mary's murderer too. But so yes, the good cop, bad cop. It is really interesting. I want to say too, at the end of the Bone Shrine, before I decided I was going to write a sequel, there's a exchange when between Joe and excuse me, Biff and Captain Condren, where she tells him, I've been accepted at Lewis and Clark in Portland," and he goes, "Oh, that's wonderful! What a prestigious college! Congratulations!" And she tells him, "But if you hire me as your intern for this case, I'm going to enroll in a criminal justice program up in the Moses Lake Community College." And so I had inadvertently kind of set it up for Biff to be my viewpoint character in the second novel. And the interesting thing is I used third person limited through Joe Gardner in about half of the opening Bone Shrine, and then third person limited with Rochelle Gardner, his mother, where she's off trying to save her son.
Mhm.
Second book, I decided this is Biff's all the way, and as
Yeah.
reliable or unreliable as she is, it's a strong coming of age presentation of a 19-year-old who has a taste of the real world that most of us don't have in our entire lives, and
Yeah.
So it was fun shifting gears and having a different point of view perspective through the second novel too.
Yeah, we should mention that Captain Conrad is the good guy, the good cop. He's with the Washington State Patrol, and fascinating character in himself, I think. I think there's so many great characters in here, and one of them I have to say is the lawyer. I've got to pull down my because there's so many stuff I have about him when I get to it here. Who has the he has the Zippy for Pinhead for President 2000 on his wall, and he has a bobblehead of Max Headroom. So I have to believe that the 80s were good to you because you remember.
Well, I'm a transit driver, and for years I drove between Bellingham and Mount Vernon every Monday and Tuesday, and it was prior to COVID, and there was quite a community of people, a lot of students going to Western, and one attorney who was the chief prosecuting attorney for Skagit County, Rosemary, and she was. I saw her on Dateline once trying the dog whisperer case, which was infamous up in Anacortes, which is in the county I live in, and she would be in the same bus as the head of the public defender's office, and they had some conversations which had subtext I had no idea about. But one of the fellows that worked for the public defenders was a man named Will, who was I mean, he was totally the model. He would show up 30 seconds late but I'd see him riding down the hill. I'd wait for him, and he had a square bucket with all kinds of um, you know, bumper stickers on it and whatnot. And he was my inspiration for that Angus McIntosh
Oh,
character.
mhm,
And as we discussed in the earlier interview in the first book, he's a really good lawyer. He knows how to see around the corners, and he comes up with
mhm,
some pretty savvy solutions for the first book.
mhm.
And he makes a reappearance in the second book too. And you had mentioned the Krugerrands, and um, I had to that was one of the revisions I made in the first book, as I had there was a smuggling of cash, and I changed it into smuggling of Krugerrands simply because of the fingerprinting opportunities.
Yeah.
That plays out very significantly through the second book. So that was one of the revisions I made. So there were
Mhm.
a couple of other major ones, but nothing,
Yeah.
dramatic.
I need to back up and talk a little bit about one of the themes, and that is the Nichiren Buddhism that runs through this, the chanting interesting, and I have some slight acquaintance with it. My late wife many years ago was kind of interested in it for a while, so she had a scroll and she was doing chanting. So I'm interested how you got involved with that.
Well, it's just part of my studying of, I'm fascinated with religions, from the different types of wisdom we can garner from, whether it's Roman Catholicism or I grew up Lutheran myself, but I was fascinated with this branch of Buddhism. It's a close cousin to Zen, but there's this chanting that's involved, and um, it was a way in the book to explore the sort of depth of my characters spiritually. And I've done a lot of research on the different religions and such, and I have a scene that I've had to work hard on earning in the first book, where Rochelle flies off to Sweden, where her sister's married to a Swede, and Gunnar Larson somehow is able to get um, out of the country the morning after Mary's murdered, and that was one of the huge frustrations for Angus McIntosh, that he couldn't um, get any testimony from this person who's clearly somehow involved in this case. And of course, that unfolds in a surprising way in the second book. And
Mm-hmm.
um, but I just the the Kuma character, who plays a role in the first book as the exchange student at Joe Gardner's and Rochelle Gardner's home when they're in high school, and they play on the local American Legion team, and both are really good baseball players. You know, he's modeled on uh, Iwakuma, who was a pitcher for the Mariners, who had a no-hitter, was probably the second best, the number 2 pitcher behind Felix Hernandez, and he's a Nichiren Buddhist. Tina Turner, the great, R&B singer, she recently passed away. She was a Nichiren Buddhist. So there's a lot more people than people realize, and some people, think it's all about Zen and mindfulness, but this brand of it has the chanting, which felt worked well in this novel. And Rochelle's very interested in it. And there's a poignant scene in the first book where she connects with Mary when she goes back to her house the first time, after the vigil, which was kind of a real surprising thing, the way that evolved. But that's the first book. So
Mhm. I just want to mention a few of the cultural references. Now, for those of you who are watching this and might know the Mid-Columbia or the Dalles or whatnot, you managed to mention Shakey's Pizza, the Baldwin Saloon, a reference to the band Poison in the song Every Rose Has Its Thorn, the theater at George Washington, the Tri-City Dust Devils, and for real deep cut for trivia fans, Bob Blackburn's description of a fly ball as a can of corn from the time when he was broadcasting for the Portland Beavers of the old West Coast League that played the San Francisco Stars and whatnot. He later on went on and did a whole bunch of stuff in the Seattle area sports teams, but can of corn that's a reflection from my past hearing that. Thank you for that.
you're welcome. The funny thing is the Gorge Amphitheater is such a major presence up near Moses Lake on the Columbia River, of course. But I just went back and did some research, and literally 5 days before I set this horrendous murder and situation at the Bone Shrine, Poison played at the Gorge Amphitheater, and I go, "Oh, perfect!" And I was never a Poison fan, but it was like in every what's it? Every what has its thorn, every rose has
Every
its.
rose has thorn, yeah.
It's like it's so. There's a meeting. There's the one character that I had in the first book that blossom. It's amazing. I used almost all the characters in the first book show up in the second book.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, uh, Father Jose El Padre does not, and
Mm-hmm.
the prosecuting attorney does not. And I was trying to figure out who else did, and almost everybody else appears in the second book. But
Yeah.
there are 2 jail guards. One's Big Max, and his partner Squat Sammy. And Biff is very short. Biff is about 5 foot tall, and uh, uh, and Sammy, I mean, he just became a full-fledged character out of,
Mm-hmm.
basically as minor a character as you can imagine in book 1. And I really, really enjoyed how I could make him the great, great, great grandnephew of Smohala, the prophet chief from the Wanapum tribe. That's, I don't know if they're extinct now, but they're very close to being extinct. So
Yeah, which and when you mention Wanapum and Smohola, the fact is that you have a Wanapum County and Smohola town in there, and I did not. I said, I wonder where that Smohola comes from. So I did look it up, and he was a Wanapum, however you say it, dreamer prophet associated with the Dreamers movement among the, and that's pretty fantastic to have that. So I love people who send me in research because it means that you've written things that intrigue me and grab me. And the other thing I learned was Loudermill, a legal hearing for unionized public employees to present their case against being terminated. Never heard that before. And I've been covering things for many, many years. So thank you for expanding my horizons.
well, the casino up the casino up over the hill from Warm Springs
Yeah.
is it Seven Drums Casino, I believe, and that's part of the Washoe religion that Smohola
Mhm.
started, and he lived in the 1800s. He was very influential in that. He was not the Shakers integrated Pentecostal sorts of religions, but he wanted to go back to the old ways, and even back where the ghost dancers were
Mhm.
slaughtered by the cavalry. It's some part of that same movement in the late 1800s of preserving the old ways from some of these remnant um,
Mhm.
groups. But
Yeah.
he's
Well,
fascinating. Yeah.
You have so many fascinating characters, and I have to ask this now. How's the third book coming along?
I have another set of books, or a book that I drafted, and it's set up here in the Skagit Valley. But I think I'm going to spend my energy on that one next. I do have a really rough idea for a third one, but we'll see how time unfolds. This gives the who done it away, and it's got to
Yeah.
change gears and
Well,
any.
I just have to believe that following Biff as she takes classes at the college, at community college, and something in the real world excites her and she gets involved. That's just the only thing I can think of. But I throw a couple of random things at you because again, my notes go all over the place in here. One of them is Kuma, the exchange student friend. I have to ask, is there any, by any chance, this is a weird one, connection with longtime Pendleton radio station KUMA, which stands for Umatilla County?
None whatsoever.
Okay,
It was only Iwakuma, the pitcher for the Mariners. That's where that
okay.
came from.
Just
And
checking
he's
on that.
totally different age. It doesn't line up with how old Iwakuma was, but
Yeah. And then what was the other? Oh, also even the small characters. Tomiko, Kuba's sister, comes from Japan to help find Mary's real killer. You got development. There's backstories in all of these people. Do you write out treatments before you put them in?
it's more arduous than that. I think I'll write the draft, and it's a matter of taming it back. So sometimes when you write a first draft, you really are doing a biography of a
Uh,
character,
yeah,
and sometimes you don't need to go there. You had asked me in our earlier meeting who Jill McCoy, who's Biff's mother, who's a
yeah,
very minor character, but not really, because everything Biff does throughout the book as a 19-year-old intern is to not risk losing her opportunity to be on this case.
yeah.
She manages to find herself in a lot of danger. So when I first drafted the Who story, I had Biff at the bus scene, which is the Tramposo gang. They go up to
Mhm.
bust it and they don't find anything, and we find out that they've been tipped off the state patrol that goes in there. But I have a really good critique partner. She has a book coming up being published, and she sets me straight on some things. She goes, no, you can't have her exposed, and she's so right. So I edit it so she's waiting with the forensic scientists at Mary's Inn in George Washington for this bust to conclude, which
Mhm.
it does. And I think I had to reckon with Biff's impertinence and immaturity, and her relationship with Captain Condren. That boss intern relationship plays out and very strongly throughout the novel. And I even did some of my last edits were to kind of make Biff lead him into a conclusion she's already had, rather than to confront him. And I think that plays out better than the first iterations. And so
Mhm.
it was a real challenge. And also Biff really is only on the front lines twice. Once she's waiting at the opening chapter, and then she does go on a search later on that's very important to solving the
Mhm.
case, again as the assistant of the forensic scientist, who's a renowned forensic scientist that comes over to help his friend Captain Condren in the Washington State Patrol. They're both in the Washington State Patrol, but
Mhm.
he's key. And I had to be so careful not to be. I mean, one of my beta readers said, well, why didn't you have her? Well, she's not weapons qualified. She's not weapons trained. So I can't put her in harm's way. But boy, she manages to find, she's like perils for Pauline. She manages to find herself in some, some horrendous messes. She just has a nose for it. And that was part of the fun of writing it. But yeah.
I can tell. I mean, it comes through. Again, I take lots and lots of notes when I read. I almost burned up my hands on this one, taking all the transcription because this was so, I want to say, what's the word I'm looking? Packed in the best possible sense. I don't mean it was stuffy. I meant it was just laden as a good chocolate chip cookie is laden with plenty of chocolate chips. There's so much in here that just, well, for instance, here's one thing. You have a character, a bank manager. Well, she's going on this trip. She's trying to find where some keys go to. She thinks it's to a safe deposit box. This bank manager calls attention to a key because it carried a European style horizontal slash through it. And then he starts to lecture about the Hanseatic League. Out of the blue, here's a complete, you got a whole picture of this guy, and that's all you say about him.
That's funny. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I lived in Sweden as an exchange student, so I learned to write the sevens and in the Hanseatic League, one of the coolest places in Sweden, of course, Bergen, Norway, and Copenhagen, but the Gotland, the island off of Sweden, you can take a ferry from Stockholm to get there. There's a little island off just at the north end of it. This is in the Baltic Sea, where the famous film director Ingmar Bergman had an island, basically a huge amount of property for his estate north of there. But that was the Hanseatic League, and it's a fast. I don't know. It just fit for that old duffer who was taken to Biff as she's talking to him. So
One of the things I feel about every one of the people, even as I mentioned, the bank manager who doesn't even get a name in it, have a backstory. They are fleshed out. And I wonder, do you write poetry?
no, not really, not much. And I'm not musical at all. This is
Oh,
this is my outlet is writing.
okay. I realize, but a poet's gift is to see the telling phrase that indicates what a person's among the many others. And you have that gift. And I suspect you'd write damn good poetry if you felt like it. So
Thank you. I don't.
where, what do you hope that people take away from this book when they close it?
Well, there's a gratification of seeing. I mean, the two books really fit in the sense of the first book without being didactic, moralistic, or whatever. Um, the choices that and I talk to people on my bus all the time from all walks of life. A lot of methadone patients that go to the clinics in the area, ride the transit, and it's like the first book is we make choices. And when you're 16, 17, 18, and your friends go, "Hey, dude, you got to check this stuff out." Maybe that's the rabbit hole choice they make. We tend to focus on what's the gateway drug, is it alcohol? Is it marijuana? Is it whatever? But I think it's your peers and your choices. And boy, I don't know how I came up with a dilemma as concentrated and tragedy as Joe Gardner found himself in the opening. But it was all based on his choices he made after a horrible baseball injury to go into the street drugs instead of the opioids that he was prescribed. And without that, you don't have the Bone Shrine story. So it's consequences from our actions is the first book, really. And the second book is just this dogged resolve that it took Biff McCoy to find, who her best friend's murderer was. And it's just so she was so dogged. She got herself into so many dilemmas, and that was fun in a way. I mean, it's like it's fiction. It's like, boy, can she, how is she going to get through this? And it's a 19-year-old, and watching her change as a person through her choices. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, it's like I didn't know when I finished the Bone Shrine, the first book, who the killer was, but when I started the second one, I did know who I wanted it to be, and taking it from there. But I think inadvertently, when I have Biff who fibs, who was not, she's got this fault where she likes to do what it takes to whatever it takes is justified because it's in the name of finding Marys. But as a culture, aren't we? This whole when I grew up, the Soviet Union had Pravda and TASS or whatever the two, and they were concerned, oh,
Yeah.
those are propaganda machines, and they'll the ends the ends justify the means, so we can say whatever we want. And boy, America needs to watch itself. I mean, it's like, look what we're dealing with. It's like anything in the name of the end seems to be okay, and in a minor way, that's what Biff McCoy suffers from, even though you can certainly argue that going after a corrupt county sheriff's department and whatnot. The reason I named the county Wanapum County and the town Smohala. There's plenty of examples of Lewiston, Idaho is in Nez Perce County and whatnot, but I really didn't want there be any implication that Ephrata, Washington, and Grant County were corrupted with their caucus. That was when I wanted Moses Lake, but I did not want to insinuate
Yeah.
that was in any way a veiled reality there, because I
Yeah.
don't believe that's the case. So
Yeah. Well, you have so many good examples of things that are absolutely real and exist. And we have touch points all through this for those of us who live in this area, tons and tons of them. But that's made a conscious decision to make that not quite real because you could say what you wanted. This is like one of the people who like to write political commentary, write science fiction novels and set them in the future, kind of as if this goes on, this is what's going to happen. You kind of did that just a little bit there.
a little bit, yeah, that wasn't my intent going through. It was really more just the resolve of this.
Mhm.
Writing coming of age characters are a lot of fun.
Oh
it's
yeah. And
it's
we all can shudder over some of the things that we did on our way from cluelessness, mostly not from malice. We also should mention for people that the Bone Shine is a real place or was, and I think you've mentioned that it's closed to public now. Is that the?
It was interesting. Yeah, after the Bone Shrine was published, and I actually sent a copy of it over to the Washington State entity that oversees the Potlatch Wildlife Refuge where it was located, and all of a sudden temporarily closed. I go, well, I know that had to be because of they don't want it, and people would go to it, and it was pretty. It's pretty unimpressive. It's a bunch of rocks with some bones in the middle, but the setting fits so perfectly with the
Yeah,
pond and the reeds, and for whatever reason they closed it, and then they permanently closed it. And now the little pin that used to be on the Google map is gone. So it's all my fault. I
yeah.
ruined
On
it's
the
not exactly the Grand Canyon. Let's just say that.
yeah, well, on the other hand, that's kind of a compliment. I mean, that many people read the book, fascinated by the fact this is a real place, and wanted to go see it. So, um, what is it that I haven't asked you want to make sure we mention before we close this out?
Well, I think the third chapter is what was really where the second book moves off of the first one, and that's where Joe and Biff realize how connected they are in life and that they are friends. And when she tells him that she's been abducted, which she's not wanted to tell anybody else, he was ready to go to war for her basically. And that's the chapter where we meet the blind great horned owl, which hopefully is still up at the Gorge Discovery Center, and beautiful owl. You can't tell it's blind, but those amber eyes, it's just an amazing animal. And it was insisting that it be the spirit animal for the Bone Shrine crime series. And another fun one is there's a sturgeon that Jeff Stewart, the local sculptor, and the
Mhm.
Dalles put all kinds of time in. I remember him carving this thing, and as the Discovery Center was being constructed, I don't know how long it took him to carve that, but it's 17 feet long,
Huge.
uh,
Yes.
and I use his real name because why not? That's cool thing.
Yeah.
It's such a cameo, and that was the inspiration. Oh, a little funny story. I had come across miniature radio race car track that's on the way between Pasco and Moses Lake, and I tried to use that as my date for Biff and Sammy when they
Yeah.
go there, um, and my critique partners, oh, it just doesn't quite work for me, and so well, I love to fish. I go kayak fishing for lingcod when I lived in the where I lived in White Salmon. I've got lots of steelhead there. I've got sturgeon right across in Dallasport, and it's just
Yeah.
so I know fishing much more. I didn't have a clue about radio controlled race cars. It sounded like
Yeah.
fun, and I made the date, and I don't know, the whole fishing scene kind of evolved out of that. Okay, I'm kind of over my head with the radio control car, so I moved it into this fishing scene, which I was much more writing from a base that I was familiar with, but it was also them hooking into this. I won't give it away, but hooking into this incredibly large sturgeon, which do live at the base of the dams, and this would be McNally Dam. And I had a lot of fun with writing that because it was much more steeped in how to fish and what would happen and go on. So, um,
Yeah. Well, there's another, and by doing so, you allowed yourself to put another plot point in about something they discover on the boat. So I will just leave it at that.
right.
Yeah.
So,
Wow. I I want to thank you for the time. You've been very generous and very understanding of some of the additional technical difficulties I had in getting you on here. But I just want to say to people, these are wonderful books. This fellow's a pretty decent author. You ought to check it out. Our, oh man, our guest today, Scott MacFarlane, in his new sequel to The Bone Shine. It's called Who? Highly recommended. Thank you so much for being with us today.
thank you for your time too, Roger. You do such a wonderful job with what you do as well.